and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be doing an updated presidential election prediction between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Before I start, I'd like to say if you like my content, subscribe to the channel and leave a like and comment, and with that said, let's get into it. So our nominees today are going to be Donald Trump and Joe Biden, and I'm just going to start how I usually do and fill in the safe states for each candidate. So for Donald Trump, he has Montana, Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, the Dakotas, Nebraska at large and its 1st and 3rd congressional districts, Kansas, Oklahoma. I'm going to add Iowa to that list too, even though that wasn't solid before. I think it is going to be in 2024. Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, West Virginia, and South Carolina. As for the solid states for Joe Biden, we have Washington, Oregon, California, Hawaii, New Mexico, Colorado, Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Vermont, Maine's 1st congressional district, and Maine at large, and also Washington, D.C. And I missed it also, the state of Illinois. So with all the solid states filled in, Joe Biden starts at 198 and Donald Trump at 128. So now I'm going to fill in the likely states for Joe Biden, starting with the state of Virginia. Virginia voted for Biden by a little over 10 points in 2020, and I do think that's going to shift a little bit to the right in 2024 for several reasons. Right now, Virginia obviously has a Republican governor in Glenn Youngkin, and it's possible that Republicans can take back both state houses this November in 2023. And although state elections are not equal to federal elections, in the United States House of Representatives elections in 2022, Virginia Republicans did better than expected. And having a state government run by Republicans can tend to affect federal races. I mean, look at Florida. We saw Ron DeSantis win by like 19 points in 2022 when he only won by a fraction of a point in 2018. And I think that helped Trump win in 2020 as well. And we've seen the opposite in Michigan, where Gretchen Whitmer has won by double-digit margins both times, and Michigan got bluer over that time as well. So I do think that Virginia will probably revert a little bit, but not much. I think Biden probably wins it by a little more than 8 points, so I'm calling Virginia likely Democrat. The next likely state I'm going to be talking about is the state of Minnesota. In 2016, Trump got really close to winning this state. He was less than 2 points off from beating Hillary Clinton, but it turned out that was really just because, one, turnout was low, and two, third-party turnout was high. In 2020, Trump actually got a higher percent of the vote in Minnesota than he did in 2016, but Biden got mostly all of the people who voted third party in 2016. And so going into 2020, a lot of people expected Minnesota to be competitive, and ultimately it wasn't even really that close. I think it's not really going to be close in 2024 either, so I am calling it likely Democrat. I think Biden probably wins it by a similar margin as last time. The next likely Democrat state is going to be the state of New Hampshire. New Hampshire is a state that Trump almost won in 2016, kind of similarly to Minnesota. And then in 2020, it wasn't even really close. It was almost exactly the same margin as Minnesota. And Trump just doesn't really have that much appeal in New England. The only reason he really even got close to Hillary Clinton in New Hampshire is because it was Hillary Clinton. Biden will probably slightly improve on his margin from 2020, so I'm expecting Biden to win New Hampshire in 2024 by around 8 points. Finally, Nebraska's 2nd congressional district is going to be likely Democrat too. Joe Biden won this district by about 6 points in 2020, and during redistricting it did get a little bit redder, but also suburbs are trending against Republicans, so at that point it's kind of a wash. I think Biden probably wins it by a similar margin of around 6 to 7 points. So next up, I'm going to talk about the likely Republican states, starting with the state of Alaska. Alaska is a state that's been trending towards Democrats for the last decade or so. In 2020, Trump won it by a little more than 10 points. I think in 2024, it'll probably be a little bit less than 10 points. And also, Alaska has implemented ranked choice voting, which will only affect the presidential race if Trump gets less than 50% of the vote, which I don't think is going to happen. But I think it's possible because he only got 52% of the vote in 2020, so it is possible he drops below 50, so I thought I'd mention it. Next up is going to be the state of Ohio. Ohio is a state that voted for Obama twice and then voted for Trump by 8 points twice. Last year, J.D. Vance won the Senate race over Tim Ryan, who was a fairly good candidate, and he won by 6 points. Honestly, you can make the argument for Ohio being solid Republican, but I think Trump is probably going to win by just slightly below the 10-point margin that I classify as solid, so I'm calling it likely Republican. Next up is going to be the state of Florida. Florida, as I mentioned earlier, voted for Ron DeSantis by 19 points in 2022. It's been trending towards Republicans. It's one of the few states that Trump did better in 2020 than 2016. Even counties like Miami-Dade and Palm Beach flipped to Republicans last year, and I don't think that's going to happen in the presidential race because that's obviously going to be much more polarized. It's going to be a lot closer. But I do still think Florida is going to trend Republican in 2024, so I think Trump's probably going to win it by around 6 or 7 points. Finally, Maine's 2nd district is also going to be likely Republican. Trump won this district by 10 in 2016, and then he still won it by 6 in 2020. I think it's going to be somewhere in between there in 2024, probably like 7 points, so I am calling it likely Republican. So with all these solid and likely states filled out, we have Donald Trump at 179 and Joe Biden at 226. There's 133 electoral votes left, and these are all the toss-up states. I'm going to go through all of these west to east, starting with the state of Nevada. Nevada is a state that has been trending Republican every election cycle since 2008, and in 2022, Republicans won the governorship there, but they came just short of winning the Senate election, even though polls had them winning both races by a lot wider margins. I do expect the rightward trend that happened from 2008 to 2020 to continue in 2024. Whether that's enough for Donald Trump to win this state, I'm not exactly confident about. I do think Joe Biden's very narrowly going to win Nevada again and pick up its 6 electoral votes by less than 2 points. Next up is the state of Arizona, and Arizona is practically the opposite of Nevada in terms of its trends. It's been trending Democrat since about 2012. In 2012, Romney won it by about 9. And then Trump only won it by 3 in 2016, even though he beat Hillary Clinton. And then obviously it flipped against Trump and voted for Joe Biden in 2020. And there are a couple factors at play here. Demographic changes are a big one, and also the fact that the suburbs are shifting towards Democrats, and that caused Maricopa County to flip in 2020. Maricopa County, of course, is the home of Phoenix, which is a really big blue city. And typically, whoever carries Maricopa County will carry the state. Also at play is Donald Trump's feud with John McCain, and even though McCain did die almost 5 years ago, that is still at play, and even recently some comments have come out about what Trump said about John McCain. None of this is in favor of Donald Trump right now. Also in 2022, Republicans completely underperformed in Arizona. Carrie Lake lost the governorship when she was supposed to, and Blake Masters lost the Senate race, and even though that one was supposed to be close, he lost it by 5 points. And there were several other candidates who were supposed to win in Arizona on the Republican side that ended up losing. I believe the only Republican who won statewide in a high-profile office was Kimberly Yee. So I don't really think Trump has much of a shot here. I think Joe Biden's going to increase his margin in Arizona by a couple points and probably win by a little more than 3 points. Next up is going to be the state of Texas, and Texas is trending towards Democrats, but not really as quickly as Democrats had hoped. In 2016, Donald Trump won it by just under 9 points. And then in 2020, he actually outperformed expectations. Polls had him winning by a little more than 1 point, and he ended up winning by almost 6. So even though Texas is trending towards Democrats, it is doing so at a much slower rate than they thought. And the reason this state is trending towards Democrats is, like the rest of the country, the suburbs are trending towards Democrats. But the reason it hasn't flipped on Republicans yet is because the rurals are still ruby red, and the Rio Grande Valley is actually trending towards Republicans, or at least it did from 2016 to 2020 for Donald Trump. And Greg Abbott also did better in 2022 in the Rio Grande Valley than he did in 2018. With all this in mind, I do think Donald Trump is still going to win the state in 2024, but I think that it's going to shift against him by about a point. He'll probably win by around 5 points, so I am calling Texas lean Republican. Next up is going to be the state of Wisconsin, and now Wisconsin is probably the most conservative of the 3 remaining Rust Belt states we have here. But Republicans haven't really had any big wins here recently other than Ron Johnson's win in 2022, and even then Ron Johnson was supposed to win by like 5 points and only ended up winning by 1. Aside from Ron Johnson in the Senate race last year, Democrats have pretty much swept everything else. In 2018, they won the Senate race, and in 2018, they also flipped the governorship against the incumbent Republican Scott Walker. Then, of course, in 2020, Biden flipped the state back from Trump when Trump won it in 2016. And in 2022, Tony Evers, the Democratic governor, was supposed to lose, or it was at least supposed to be kind of a toss-up, but he ended up winning by around 3 points. Then in 2023, I think back in April, there was a Supreme Court election, and the liberal candidate beat the conservative candidate by double digits. And of course, that's not going to happen in the presidential election. The reason that happened is because the candidate was kind of a bad candidate and didn't really want to fundraise or campaign at all. But the fact that Wisconsin did vote for a liberal candidate is not a good sign for Donald Trump in the state. I think Joe Biden is probably narrowly going to win it, probably by a similar margin as 2020. So I am calling Wisconsin tilt Democrat. Next up is the state of Michigan, and honestly, it's a pretty similar story to Wisconsin. There haven't been many major Republican wins since 2016 when Donald Trump won the state. They elected Democrats in the governor and Senate elections in 2018 by wide margins. And then in 2020, Joe Biden flipped it by about 2 points against Donald Trump, and the Senate election went Democrat by about a point and a half. And then last year, Michigan Democrats won across the board by 9 or 10 points each. Again, I don't think it's going to be that wide of a margin for Joe Biden, but I do still think he's probably going to win by, I'd say, 3 to 4 points in 2024. So I am calling Michigan lean Democrat. Next up, we're going to go down to Georgia. And now, Georgia is a state that, once again, has been trending against Republicans in recent years. The state went from voting for Trump by 5 points in 2016 to flipping and voting for Biden in 2020. And this is largely due to two factors. One, Trump wasn't really that popular. He's not a great fit for the state of Georgia. Obviously, Trump did pretty poorly in suburbs around the whole country, and the Atlanta suburbs are a huge part of Georgia's electorate. And not only that, but the cities and suburbs in Georgia are growing, and so they're becoming a greater part of the electorate and bluer, and so that's just kind of a recipe for disaster for Republicans. And so I do think Joe Biden's probably going to win this state again, probably expand his margin. I'm going to call this like a tilt to lean state for Joe Biden at this point. Against Trump, he probably wins it by a little more than 2 points, so I am going to call Georgia lean Democrat, but it could be closer than that. Next up is the state of North Carolina, and let me just say, North Carolina is a state that Republicans should be worrying about. North Carolina is very similar to Georgia demographically. It's a large state in the South, and it has cities, so even though the rurals are really Republican, the cities are very Democratic. And conservatives like to say that North Carolina is a perpetual lean R state, but really that's just not the case. North Carolina has proven on the presidential level that it's able to vote for Democrats. It voted for Obama in 2008, and they currently have a Democratic governor. Not only that, but Republicans have kind of underperformed in recent elections in North Carolina. In 2020, Trump only won the state by around a point when he won it by over 3 points in 2020 or in 2016. And in 2022, Republicans underperformed. They lost a House seat that they were supposed to win, and the Senate race was a lot closer than it was supposed to be. Ted Budd only won by a little more than 3 points when he was supposed to win by like 5 or 6. As of right now, I do think that Donald Trump is going to win North Carolina. I think it's going to be below 1 point margin, but I do still think he's going to win it, so I am calling North Carolina tilt Republican. But no one really thought Georgia was going to flip until the end of the 2020 cycle, so just keep an eye on North Carolina. Finally, we have the great state of Pennsylvania, and recently, Democrats have done very well in Pennsylvania, specifically in 2022. They won the governorship by 15 points and the Senate race by 5 points, and they hung on to a couple House seats that they were supposed to lose, and they flipped the state House of Representatives. And most of those down ballot races were largely because Shapiro was a great candidate. He came off as moderate, and Doug Mastriano was a horrible candidate who came off as this woman-hating extremist, especially, on abortion, which was a huge issue in the 2022 midterms. And so you could argue that Shapiro's huge win carried Fetterman over the line and carried a bunch of congressmen over the line, really helped Pennsylvania Democrats in the state houses. I don't think something like that's going to happen in 2024. I do think Biden is very slightly favored, so I am calling Pennsylvania tilt Democrat, but it's probably going to be a similar margin to 2020. I think most people have their minds made up in Pennsylvania at this point. Trump does have that unique Rust Belt appeal that most Republicans don't have. But then again, Joe Biden does have that white working class appeal that a lot of Democrats don't have anymore. So I do think Joe Biden's still going to narrowly carry it. And so when all is said and done, I believe Donald Trump is going to get 235 electoral votes and Joe Biden is going to win with 303 electoral votes. This is kind of a boring prediction because every state that I filled out actually has the same statewide result as 2020. The only reason the electoral votes are different is because of the change in population in each state. But I also think it would be interesting if this happens because it's never happened before that two electoral maps looked exactly the same. But anyway, that's what I have right now for my presidential election prediction. Obviously, there's a lot of months to go, over a year to go before this election. And so this is very subject to change. This is just my early prediction. If you like this video, go ahead and leave a like and comment and tell me what you agree with, what you disagree with, and how I can improve these videos. When you subscribe, turn on the notification bell so you know when we upload. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a great day.